Think you need a 10-step plan before you make a move? Spoiler, that's how your dreams collect dust. Listen, I know so many actors struggle with finding the right path forward. Should you take any job, just any job, to make ends meet, even if it drains your energy? Or should you wait for the perfect role that might never come? How do you pay your rent in the meantime? How do you eat in the meantime? There's actually a third option, one where you create financial stability while supporting your creative growth. And this is based on the exact method that I used 14 years ago and still use to this day by bringing experts, casting directors, coaches, and other people in the industry to a select group of actors and organizing workshops, retreats, networking events, seminars, all sorts of different kinds of experiences around the things that I am interested in learning more about. Let's get into this because the truth is, most of us get stuck in this endless cycle of planning. We think we need to have everything perfectly mapped out before we can take that first step. We want guarantees, we want certainty, we want to know exactly how things will unfold. But that's not how real progress happens. Real progress comes from action, even imperfect action. In fact, I'm always telling my clients, imperfect action is always better than no action. And I learned this lesson firsthand when I was trying to rebuild my acting career after a long break. What I discovered changed everything for me. And it led to creating an income stream that really supported me through the lean and mean times between bookings. And it helped me to build invaluable industry connections. And it completely transformed how I approach my creative work. So just a quick little blah, blah. I had been a professional working actor in America, but I moved to Germany, which is where I currently live, almost 30 years ago. But about 16 years into my life here in Germany, I had decided that I wanted to return to acting, and my skills were really rusty. So when I decided to return, I was like, okay, the first problem is that I need to get my instrument back in tune and get my confidence back in my skills. The only thing that was going to do that for me was to get the training that I needed. But living in Munich created a very specific set of challenges. I couldn't, first of all, find quality acting training in English. So I knew I could get that training if I flew to places like Chicago, London, New York, LA. But honestly, that just wasn't financially feasible. And not only was it not financially feasible, because that would have cost me thousands of dollars to get to these places, pay for hotels, pay for food, and pay for the workshop, but I would have also been taking really precious time away from my family and my son, who was still a child at the time. But I wasn't ready to abandon my goal either. And that's how I was kind of feeling. Like either I get this training, which is out of Munich, or I give up. And I always find that the kernel of your solution is always wrapped up in the middle of that big gooey problem. So the solution that I came up with to get the training I needed without the constant travel or excessive costs was actually pretty simple. I began reaching out to some of the bigger acting schools, some of the bigger acting studios, first in London because that was closest, and just reaching out to acting coaches that I had heard amazing things about. And of course, I was dealing with a lot of imposter syndrome. I didn't know if I would get laughed at, hung up on, whatever. But the truth is, I was really honest. I began from a place of radical honesty, something I always preach, radical honesty, radical accountability. And I just said, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I want. I'd love to bring you to Munich. What would that look like? What do I need to do to get you here? And they told me. And I sat down with a pen and paper and started to figure out, okay, if it's going to cost this much, plus the flight, plus getting a room, plus all these different things, right? How many actors do I need to just cover my costs? And once I had that figured out, I thought, I can do this. And that's when I called that coach back up and said, okay, let's make this happen. So in other words, I just created what I needed. And by creating that thing, it resonated with other actors who also needed it and wanted it. And I very quickly not only got my base number of actors, but I actually filled up that workshop. And not only did I fill up that workshop, but I booked him in for 4 more workshops. So already just by creating that one thing had created actually 5 workshops. Not to mention, we were also running 2 workshops a day. So one long workshops for adults and a short 3-hour workshop after dinner for people like from 15 to 18, so non-adults. And it all came from me knowing that if I have a specific problem, if I have a specific need, then there are probably some other people out there who also have a specific problem and a specific need. So you just have to take that first tiny step. Rather than waiting for the perfect solution to appear, just create it yourself. But of course, once he did agree, this presented me with a whole new set of challenges, right? I had to find other actors who also wanted to train with him. And I had to secure a space that would work for a workshop because they can get loud, they can get messy, they can get active, right? So I had to figure out all that pricing to make it worthwhile for the coach while still also being accessible to the participants. And each one of these questions led to different actions. So every time you have a specific challenge, where do I find the coach? That leads to one action. I think that people often will see the problem. How do I relaunch my acting career when I feel like I'm rusty as hell and I need to get my instrument in tune again? How do I do that? And so they're looking at this whole alps of problems instead of just thinking, well, what do I need first? What is the very first thing that is missing or that is needed? So in my case, it was the training, which opened up new questions. Where do I find the coach? Where do I find the participants? And each one of these needs to be tackled on its own. So you can even do like a mind map. Just let these questions, as they come up in your own mind, lead to the questions that you need to answer on your mind map. And then start answering the questions in as much as you can for yourself. So where would I find coaches? Well, I started to reach out to some of the theater schools and things like that, acting studios in London, where I knew they had super high caliber coaches. Where did I find other actors? Well, there are tons of actors groups on Facebook and many other places, English-speaking theater groups, all those kinds of things. And then I started to research rehearsal spaces and studios. Where can I find a room that is appropriate for an actor's workshop? I didn't have all the answers when I started, and I figured things out one step at a time, solving each problem as it presented itself rather than trying to anticipate everything from the beginning. So as I said, my first workshop was sold out, which was amazing. Not to mention that I got free training. Not only did I get free training, but my son, who was a teenager, he also got free training. So in that very first weekend, I got free training and I made 1,300 euros. Now, I know it's not a fortune, but it was something tangible that I created from one single outreach. And the most important part, I got to participate in the training I desperately needed without paying for it. So looking back, what strikes me is how unnecessary all of my planning and worrying had been. The path became clear through action, not through planning. Each step revealed the next one, but only after I had taken that first step. So following that initial workshop, something really interesting happened. Participants asked when we'd be doing the next one, and that's how I ended up booking 4 more with him. And also, having the credibility of having booked with such a high caliber coach made it much easier to reach out to other coaches. You always need just those first few people. And that's the other thing for the actors as well. Once I already had those first few actors, word started to get around that I arranged really great workshops and that actors were getting more out of than they were paying for. And they wanted to continue developing the skills that they'd learned and maintain the connections that they'd made. So I used to call these workshops with the coaches my big workshops. And then, because I knew that the actors wanted to maintain the skills that they had learned during the big workshops, I began to organize little workshops, which is where just the actors, we could all get together and rehearse, practice the different techniques that we had learned. And first, I was just doing these once a week. But as I began to bring in more coaches and people wanted more training, I began to do these up to 3 times a week. So that was fantastic and also opened up another income stream. So this easily added another 600 to 800 euros per month, which was something that I wanted to do anyway. I wanted to work on my skills just like they wanted to work on their skills. And just from that very first initiative, I was generating income while getting exactly the training I needed to rebuild my acting skills. Everyone involved was getting value, the coach, the participants, and me. And what I didn't expect was how quickly this would grow beyond the initial need for training. The workshops actually became a community. So a network, right, of English-speaking actors in Munich who were all supporting each other's growth. This came in really handy later on. We were all at kind of different places in our career. Some had agents, some didn't. Some knew the casting directors, some didn't. Some were also part of the German community, which was very useful. Some were not. But these things all supported all of us in understanding what the next steps were in our own careers. And having that English-speaking actors network within Munich was amazing because as I started to ask who are the good agents, who are the casting directors that are casting international productions, I got answers. And then as I started to get auditions, I also had automatic people to be my readers, to do the self-tapes with me, which was also super important. In other words, we were sharing opportunities, giving each other feedback, creating a creative ecosystem that just hadn't existed before. And this wasn't honestly just about money. In fact, it was hardly about money. In the beginning, it was really about the training, and the money was like a bonus. It was also about creating those connections and opportunities that I hadn't even thought of as a benefit before I started this, but realized in hindsight and while in the midst of it, how valuable these other actors are as far as everything to do with our career. Having that actor community is so, so, so important. And it all started with that one outreach, that one imperfect action taken before I had everything figured out. And this success led me to expand my approach. So I began bringing in more coaches for what I mentioned I called the big workshops, these intensive training weekends or weeks or retreats or whatever they happen to be with different coaches. And between these events, I continued running the regular practice sessions, which of course I called the little workshops. The model was simple, but powerful. Bring in the expertise, create a container for learning, and charge fairly for the value created. I wasn't teaching. I was organizing, curating, and connecting. So within about 6 months, my business was generating about 4,000 to 5,000 a month, which ended up being about 50,000 extra euros annually. Now, this is in addition to my acting income that I was still earning and my voiceover income that I was still earning. And it was also taking away the need for me to pay for training. So, add to that whatever. Say I was paying another 500 a month, so 6,000. So it was really like earning 56,000 a year in income because I didn't have to pay for that training. And this became reliable income completely separate from acting jobs. So having this financial foundation transformed my approach to acting. I could attend auditions without worrying about scheduling conflicts with the day job. And I could fund my own creative projects, which was also super important later on at another stage in my career. Now, this thing about it being done on my schedule, since I was the one curating the workshops, I could do it completely around my schedule. Am I available on this day? Great. I can organize a workshop then. Am I not? Is it my husband's birthday, my son's class trip, whatever it may happen to be? Then no, I don't have to do it on that day. And if I had an audition come up, I could easily find an actor to jump in and act as the facilitator, open the door, let the other actors in, make sure everybody had what they needed to have, if I just offered them my place for free. So it didn't even cost me anything to find people to take over it. And they were getting a ton of value out of it. So they were thrilled to do it. So instead of waiting for someone else's permission, I was creating my own thing. And I was connecting with industry professionals from a position of value rather than need. So I also later began to use this method to create workshops and seminars with casting directors and producers. And that enabled me to have conversations with them that I would not have been able to have from just a little lowly actor's standpoint. But the most powerful shift was psychological, because I no longer approached casting directors or directors as someone who was desperate for work. I wasn't scared about how I was going to pay my rent or put food on the table. I approached them as a fellow professional with my own thriving creative practice. And I can tell you from now having, done over 100 of these podcasts and many, many, many of them interviews with other industry professionals, they really value an actor who is not dependent on their acting income in order to survive, because it just frees you up creatively if you're not worrying about existential threats like food and rent. And it was that shift in positioning, which was subtle but profound, in how people began to respond to me. So when acting opportunities came along, I could take them without financial panic or not without financial panic. And when things were slower, I could increase my workshop offerings. I had created a system that adapted to the natural ebbs and flows of creative career. And as my interests began to expand, I would follow my curiosity down other paths, which led to me creating screenplays, learning about editing and directing, and it just opened up so many more opportunities. Now, the key insight was simple but powerful. Action creates momentum, and momentum reveals the path forward. I didn't have a perfect business plan when I sent that first email. I simply identified the need that I had and figured others might share it. And then I took a step towards solving it. This approach changed how I approached my acting career. Instead of waiting for opportunities, I began creating them, both for myself and for others. And this mindset shift contributed to me eventually booking roles with Netflix, Hallmark, A24. And I could approach my acting work from a place of creative choice rather than financial pressure. The lesson applies far beyond acting or workshops. Whenever we face an obstacle, we have a choice. We can wait until we have the perfect plan, or we can take an imperfect step and learn our way forward. The second approach almost always leads to faster progress and unexpected opportunities. So let me know in the comments, what is one tiny action that you could take today towards solving a problem in your own creative career? Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a start. The clarity you're seeking will come from action, not endless planning. So if you're ready to explore how to turn your passion into a sustainable income, regardless of whether you're getting booked, then join me in my free 5-day challenge, the Passion Project Blueprint. I will guide you through the exact process I used to create financial stability while pursuing my creative goals. It is the perfect side hustle to support your acting career while supporting your acting career. So the link to register is in the description below. And while you're there, make sure and also grab your free Passion Project Playbook, which is also going to kind of get you primed for the challenge itself and get you start thinking about kinds of workshops and things that you could be creating in your own community. Let's build something that supports your creative journey on your terms. Until next time, you stay your bold and beautiful self. Bye-bye.